So I'm going to tell you about a typical day in my early childhood and how adventure really is the true nature of what I believe human beings. And the reason I say that is because if you look at what you've done as a kid and what you truly enjoyed, it was the curiosity and the adventure. And I think that that's what we lose when we become adults. So a typical day in my childhood, and when I say childhood, I'm going to try to remember best. I can't remember the exact age, but just assume I was old enough to go outside and do stuff by myself. So maybe between the ages of 8 to 10 or 12 or something like that. Well, I grew up with 5 brothers. So obviously we were horsing around a lot and finding little things to do. And some of the things that pop to mind when I think about a typical day for me outside of school, right? So it's either you're getting home from school or it's the weekend and you're not at school. What are you doing? And I think that what we were doing before we got old enough to really play sports was we were just exploring and using our imagination. And we were doing all kind of crazy things. Like we grew up very poor, not very poor, but poor. And one of the things I remember that we used to do is, this is kind of funny, when McDonald's used to have those Monopoly games where you can win tickets and win burgers. We would go to McDonald's dumpster and dumpster dive for those tickets. And we would literally get in there and pull out tickets that people didn't pull off. And I know it's nasty, but when you're that age, it was the most exciting thing. We were able to do it. We would run home with the ticket excited, cleaning our hands, and we would go to McDonald's and get rewarded by eating those burgers. And we would do that a lot. And another thing that we did growing up, because we didn't have a lot of money, is we would use the dumpster dive for pop cans. So we would like walk around and jump in different dumpsters and collect cans. And then I remember there was a certain side of town we would walk on to that side of town and drop off those cans to essentially like this. It would be this big container truck that's parked in a parking lot, like next to a store or a gas station, and they would open like a certain time in the morning, and we would show up with a big bag of cans, and it would give us like $4 or $5, sometimes $10, and then we would run to the store and we would buy like some food, because like we didn't have a lot of money, and sometimes there wasn't always food in the house. So that was a way for us to like get up and go and basically figure out how to eat that day. So I'm not saying it was bad the entire time, but that made up our childhood. But, you know, I didn't perceive it as bad at that time. When you're that young, you don't really know where you stand, because that's just your reality. So you don't really understand if you're poor, if this is weird. You just know it's exciting. And so these are the type of things that I would do during the day, just find adventures. We built tree houses, right? A lot of people do this stuff during their childhood. We would build tree houses. And, you know, as a kid, all you cared about is that tree house. Like when you go to school, you're just thinking about, oh, I need to continue to work on that tree house. So when you get off school, you're running back home and you're like, hey, I still got to build this tree house. And you didn't care how you do it. We were ripping pieces of wooden fence off the apartments we lived because we needed material to build our treehouse. And we got to the point where we couldn't find more material and we had to go maybe near the edges of somebody else's yard. And we were unfortunately ripping wood off their yard, off other people's yard, which is not the right thing to do. When you're young, you're just thinking, I really want this treehouse. We're building this treehouse and we need to do whatever it takes to get it built. So really, from a very young age, I like building things. I was curious. And I think a lot of young boys are like that. And of course, if you have brothers and friends you could do it with. And so if you think about these things, what are you really doing? You're exploring. You're doing things that interest you, things that are exciting, curiosity, right? And really what you're actually doing in a natural sense, and this is my opinion about this, is human beings are naturally curious. That's what I believe. And so if you look at what you were doing when you were younger, what you were not doing was thinking about making money. What you were not doing was thinking about what's going to be your career. And I think that in the modern world, because of capitalism, unfortunately, and the way the world has been set up, about time you get into high school, you start getting indoctrinated that, hey, you have to make money, you need a career, which is true. but it is killing the real nature of what we are as human beings. That's why entrepreneurs, scientists, and things like that love what they do so much, because what they are allowed to do to a certain extent is go toward their natural inclinations of creating. Human beings, I think, in my personal opinion, were meant to create. Think about it. What does a woman fundamentally do when she produces a kid? It is her version of a creation. What does a man do? Essentially, throughout most of his life, trying to produce money and create things. He creates things. And as a result of him creating things, it makes him rich and famous. It gives him status, and women want to marry that man. So both parties are creating. You even hear people arguing that, hey, you know, men create the majority of things in society, most of the infrastructure, most of the inventions, because it's their natural inclination to create. And I think women have that inclination too, but they have a fundamental creation that men don't have. Women get to experience creation on the most fundamental level by having a kid. And a man doesn't have that. So he has to act out his desire to create different, because he don't have the process of growing a baby in your stomach, seeing that baby come out, having that level of connection with that child. So that's a form of creation, and a woman gets that naturally. So a man's like fundamentally want to create too. So he goes out and create inventions and technology, etc., to express his creativity and his manifestation. And so what I'm trying to say is that these childhood things I was doing. I mean, even when I was younger, I was into making movies. I would spend hours with this little camcorder I had, and I would basically record scenes and try to produce movies. And I would force my brothers to be involved in it and my mom to be involved in it, trying to make scenes. And I thought I'll be, you know, when you're young, you think you're going to be several things. You're trying to figure out what you want to do, you know, from music to sports to basketball to movies. And so what we were doing is just finding things to do with our time. And I think that that's what you lose when you get older. When you get older, you start to get indoctrinated into you need a career, you need a job. In order to get a wife, you need X, Y, and Z. And you start to narrow down what you're doing into practicality. And if you think about it, look at everything, all the people we look up to in society, athletes, movie stars, actors, artists. Why do we look up to them? Because they're doing the things that we really want to do. We don't want to be an accountant. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being an accountant. We don't want to be a customer service agent. We want to be the actor, the writer, the novelist, the movie star, because they're doing the creative things that human beings actually want to do. And I think that's what I was doing in my childhood. I think that I was naturally doing things that interest me. And I think that a lot of people should go back and reflect on what they were doing in their childhood, because you might find where your interest at. Like, I was really into trying to make movies, and it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to be a star, because I wasn't necessarily trying to be the actor in the movie. I was trying to create scenes. I was trying to reproduce movies that I really liked, and I was trying to capture ideals about movies that I really liked, and I wanted to film them and put them together and cut them. This is post social media, post all that stuff, post very cheap cameras and all that stuff. So that's what I did. And even when I was younger, I was building tree houses. You know, I was trying to build structures. And then obviously when I figured out sports, start playing basketball, and I wanted to be great in that. And I was researching how to get taller. You know, these are typical things that kids do. And before that, when you're really young, you don't even think about all that stuff. You were digging in trashes, collecting Monopoly stuff, trying to get a free cheeseburger. You know, we would walk around the neighborhood and, you know, find like abandoned houses, and we would go in them. And I remember we found one abandoned house. We would go in it every day for weeks. And then a month later, one day we were in that house and we were playing with a piano and messing with some stuff in the kitchen. And we realized the person who lived there actually came back. And then we ran out the house super scared. So I think that the main thing about the childhood was a lot of exploring and adventure. And I think that I did it a lot because I had so many brothers. So I had 4 brothers. I had a lot of people to do it with. And I know there was a lot of exploring, a lot of trying to build things, and a lot of even when we got old enough to realize money mattered, we started picking up cans, pop cans, and selling them. So these are some of the things I remember in my childhood, as far as what I used to do on a daily basis to keep myself busy when I wasn't in school. And I think that seeking out those adventures, seeking out those things that just interest you beyond trying to make money, beyond trying to become a professional and have a career, is what we need to get back to. And I think that that's where the real value at is in life. That's what's going to make you feel like you're doing something, not selling the hundred thousands of some useless product or even useful product that's technical, that doesn't create any value for you personally, right? Because you're just chasing money to add it up in your bank account, but you're not really fully expressing what's important to you. So I think just like in when we were childs, we should go back to seeking adventure as adults. Thank you for listening.